So once we got all this awesome artwork, our job as game developers was to start breaking down into an actual game design documentation, which is the Bible of every game. So we took a lot of the images that you see here are part of our mockups too, so we're getting an early preview of that. But our design team started drafting this very long document as to what is the game, what is in the game, what is out of the game, what is the game that we're going to be having as the MVP for the minimal viable product to release to consumers and so on. So let's have our designer talk about what this document is about.
Hey everyone, I'm Camilo, head of design here at BRB. And pretty much as Bob said, after we had all those pretty pictures and we had a clear idea of what we wanted to do, now we jump into the most important part, the GDD. This is from where everything is going to come from. We have everything here just condensed and being something that you can clearly read, understand, and then we can jump into the more delicate parts of the game development. So we have the pillars, we have features of the game, and we have a pretty brief description of everything that you want to see, from something as simple as just the basic mechanics of how does a character move on the battlefield and how it will react with different things, how they will react with abilities and the environment about them, and more just heads up things about the game. Here, as we keep developing the game, the GD keeps becoming more and more and more and more bigger as we keep adding more of the things and we keep just developing further away from things. And just we don't stay here on this document. We also have to go in depth into each one of the characters that we have.
So the last document was the game design documentation. You can see that it was very established. Most of game design documents don't get to that level of detail because we're so far into development. We have a lot of final mockups that you saw. So you saw an early preview of that. But this document here is about further breaking down each character. You might be able to see the tabs on the bottom for all our initial characters. Each one of those has their move sets and their abilities, which Camilo is going to talking about since this is his baby.
This will chase this is the meat of the game. This is what players will have to play with. So we have a brief description of each of the abilities, and as you can see, we take first off a description of the character. We look at how the character behaves, how does it look, its kid, like the fantasy that we want to share with each of the characters, and from that we start to break down a set of abilities, and that's the hardest part of being able to create a very cohesive look for the character and also the abilities, that it's also visible to be created, fun to play with, and it's something that won't break the rest of the systems that are created around it.
Well, also add, Camilo, that this is really important too to start the animation process because we have to understand the move sets. You can see here in the damage areas, the map that we created from the top down of what the arena would be. And that's really important for our animators to understand. Where is the attack? Is it localized? Does it have a direction? So we try to make it as neutral as possible. And a lot of these images, so it's a massive conversation between departments to try to understand what is it that we're building? What is the character's movesets? So there's a lot of early discussions on the design side with the pixelated ink team to understand what is and what is not. And then the art department has to understand, okay, what is the character's moves? We have to build the character, like I said previously, to work within Unity and have the proper rigging so it can take on animation and so on. And then visual effects too. This is a big part of the visual flair of the final product. This is really our Bible as to area of effects. You can see that the windmill is a little bit smaller area effect than the Starfall dance. So that we have to take that into consideration for the visual effects as well. So a big part of how we start to map this out. We're not going to get into like the meat of production and how we have to lay out the timelines for the tasks and everything else. That would be way too in depth. But you can start to see a window as to how the process works. So now that we have the look down, we understand the game design documentation, and we have the characters' mechanics. Now we have to determine how do we actually put this thing together. So this wireframing exercise is really important in terms of building the structure and the foundation of a game development. So what Camilo has done here is that taken the GDD and all the information that's there and put it into something that you as the player might be more familiar with, which is how each screen works. You can see the connections between them and how each button goes to different areas. This really gives the entire development team and our partners too what is the flow of the game. And the programmers really need to understand, what am I plugging in from what screen? Where do we go? So Camilo has done a beautiful job here to outline that. So he's going to give us a bit more detail.
Yeah, as Bob said, sometimes it's not just enough to having like your pretty document in Word and that's it for the rest of the team. It has to be to go beyond and be very specific on how each of the screen works. So even if we have the GDD entirely written in, as Bob said, in a point that we can have even complete mockups, it's really important to have also a correct flow of how the player is going to go from one screen to another screen. This also helps with transitions, everything extra with the visuals the programming side will also know which button goes to which. For example, it must be as clear and concise as possible and just visually understandable for for the development team to be able to grab it and quickly jump and having this become the final thing. So for example, we jump from the splash screen, the simple login screen, and then from the main menu, and each part of the main menu, then it's breaking down into each of its components. So just clicking on here will bring, for example, the change character screen and how it will look, and small details as the return, confirm, even a scroll bar have to be laid down here in this reference for the rest of the team to know how to handle it. And this will be repeated in all the screens, just changing your word out, having sports and things, just as they create your deck screen have also to be very specific and have each of the options for the player to look at and how each one reacts when the player taps on it. So just going through it, you can see every one of those has that consistent part and keeps a brief description of every of their screens and how it will look and how it will react to the player's input. And this is something that it's done for each of the screens. And as the game keeps growing and growing and new screens and new parts of the game keep being added, this wireframe also keeps evolving so we can accommodate to anything that the game will require in the future.